it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Also, like, mega stressful. Like, more stressful than casting, actually.
Okay. If you make a decision that ruins my favorite champion,
Yeah.
you know, then like
know, right?
that's something you got to
Yeah.
live with when
By the
I'm sitting
way,
there flaming you on
You
Twitter.
played 300 hours of this champion, and now you feel like it's ruined. There's a lot of really good positive things about casting that I didn't necessarily appreciate before I left. Even though there are a lot of emotions that go into it, right? Like, it's the spectrum of things. Really happy that I tried it, and really happy to be back casting.
All right. So we have not had an opportunity yet to talk about you rejoining the caster team.
Yeah.
Making the hop back to broadcast.
Yeah, I came back on Wednesday, and every time we were going to talk about it, we're like, wait a minute. We're planning on filming something.
Right.
Let's make sure we actually don't ask each other questions. So we're gonna see how this works out.
Everyone else might be informed, but I'm very much in the dark.
Yeah. You just locked yourself out of media. I came in for like one rehearsal. We made sure we never saw each other in the hallways.
And it's interesting because, at least from my perspective, both your departure and your return came rather unexpected. And I think to some degree, you know, like, that's where I'd start in wondering, you know, for you, you know, what you've been asked plenty, but like the impetus, right?
Right.
You know, now as opposed to a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the original departure from casting, I think mirrors a dilemma that I've held personally for a long time.
Yeah, because you wanted to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to come to the LCS because it was an opportunity. You played League. You thought, hey, this is a way I can get some exposure.
Right.
And now you're
I'm
5 years into hosting?
Yeah, this is my
LCS
6th year. I mean,
Okay.
it's insane. I never expected to be here to begin with, let alone for the length of time that I have. And I have very much found love in what I do, but that does not keep me from having that thought day in and day out of the what ifs. You know, I had never come here to begin with. What if I had left a couple of years after doing so?
What would it take? And maybe this is a quick time to turn it around on you. What would it take for you to stop hosting the LCS desk? Like, in your dream of what being an actor would be like, what type of offer would have to roll your way to give something else a try?
Well, I think that's the thing, is you already hit part of it, is the idea of an offer. So opportunity to begin with has to be there, right? Versus the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Because I think to some degree, and if you had asked me 6 years ago, I would have said, well, if you want to be an actor, you got to be willing to make that leap with no promise, right? And get out there, hit the streets, do it, live in a box for 10 years if you have to make it work.
Yeah.
But to leave the security of this job, to leave this thing that I'm challenged in doing and that I love doing, it definitely would take an opportunity being presented itself.
Okay, so I'll get into it a little bit, and that's part of maybe why it seemed sudden. And I think I had kept myself open to the opportunities, because being at Riot has allowed me to do little bits of both things before I've necessarily decided to completely jump in. So if I joined in 2012, right, I think I interviewed for Riot early in January of 2012, and they ended up hiring me sometime in February.
Right.
And in between those times, I cast the Kings of Europe tournament with D-Man, because I had cast a third place game with him after I was eliminated from WCG on, it was Dignitas back in 2011. So he knew me, and I just kind of did that. So I'd already kind of dipped my toe into casting. And then I was a QA analyst on what then was called the live design team, and I spent about 6 months there. However, there was a period of time where I also went and cast some events.
Right.
So there was an MLG, maybe 3 or 4 months into casting that I went to. I went to a PAX where I did some community stuff and did some casting. So I'd already kind of felt out where I would probably stand in the League casting community in its infancy, and eventually kind of got pitched on, hey, we're making the LCS. This is a massive opportunity.
Yep.
And I'd always wanted to ladder up into design, but then I knew the transition from QA to design was difficult. I didn't know if I'd be able to make it.
Okay.
but I kind of knew I'd be able to at least start out casting, and the opportunity was huge. So that was like the first decision where it was this massive opportunity, but it's because I had been trying it out as I was doing my other job.
Right. I think that's important to note, right? Is that for the majority of us in the casting profession, or at least in esports at the moment, almost just kind of ended up here out of happy circumstance. Not to say that not to say that those of us who are casting don't have the skill set to do so or deserve to be doing so, but that for a lot of us it was the right place, right time, and the right skill set all coming together with the opportunity.
Yeah, I used to joke when I was originally, like 2 years into casting, I thought, hey, almost everything that I've ended up doing in my life has somehow helped in preparing me for this moment.
Yep.
I played a ton of sports growing up. I was a huge sports fan. That's one of the things that I think sometimes gives me a bit of an advantage on some other casters who don't have that original sports fandom when I can make references to the NFL or the NBA.
Yep.
I had done theater in high school, so I'd already gotten a little bit of the jitters and the nerves out of there. There was obviously a lot of improving I've done in the 6 years casting, but that was something there.
Yep.
Even doing electronic engineering in college helped prepare me as far as diving into stats and understanding numbers and doing math, because League can be a very complicated game, and that ended up working into my casting. And then obviously being a
played the game at a high level.
Being a pro League of Legends player was probably the main thing that pushed me there.
Right.
But that combined with the sports background and the theater background was very unique at the time.
Yes.
And moved in. And then you look at all the other casters that have moved into this space, right? Kobe was a pro player in season 1. Azale was a World of Warcraft world champion. Freak played Warcraft 3 as a pro player, right? And Riv has been casting for a decade, right? So yes, it's a circumstance, but every caster, almost without fail, who has been here from the beginning was exceptional at something.
Yes.
Like top of that class before they became a caster.
Right, absolutely. But I think what's intriguing about this, what's interesting about this is that while all of that is true, you yes have fantastic game knowledge, have the experience of playing as a pro, and all of these other things as we just discussed. For I would argue for almost all of us, the intention, the aspiration was never to be a caster, because casting did not exist when we had aspirations, when we had lifelong career goals of this is what I want to be. I wanted to be an actor. You want to be a game designer. Kobe was an engineer, right? The only person I can think of really is like Riv kind of more intentionally followed, a caster career.
Yeah, or not to speak too much to other casters, but Captain Flowers, who is a newer League caster, kind of watched early League casting and said, hey, that's what I want to do, and he went and got it.
Now it's a reasonable goal to have, but for a lot of us that didn't exist. And so I think that's where I return to this idea of like the what ifs.
Yeah.
Because we did live in a time when we could imagine our lives differently, way down the line. And those are the kinds of things that you are going to ask yourself throughout your life. And I'm sure no matter how many of the what ifs you answer, there will always be more what ifs.
Yeah.
But what's wonderful for me to see is to have seen somebody in our group answer one of those.
Yeah.
While the rest of us are still kind of asking the what ifs.
I mean, anytime you want to try and just leave a super good job.
I know, right?
Just jump off. No, really. Okay, I'll get back to your original question, because I realized I kind of jumped us off topic a little bit. As far as like it felt like, what was your phrasing? Like it felt out of the blue, or it felt surprising?
It's very serendipitous, happenstance, opportunistic, any of those things.
Maybe a little bit of that, because as far as going back into game design, it's such a unique company, even in Riot. I think they value game design incredibly highly. There's great game designers. There's not that many games that have this many players for a decade, right? Something really good is happening here. And I was thinking, okay, if I want to be a game designer, I still know a lot of the people here. I'd stayed on the design mailing lists for the whole 7 years that I was in casting, trying to read up on stuff. I'd maintained a certain level of relationship with a lot of designers, right? So I'd kind of tried to learn about it slowly the whole time I was casting, because I
Right.
always thought there was going to be a time where I'd want to go and do this.
Well, and I think that was very clear to me. I mean,
Yeah.
from joining the teams, 6 years ago, I can say that of our team, you've long been one of the most closely connected
Right.
to the other side of the street, right? In both understanding design decisions, being able to offer the pro scene experience or perspective to the design team when they had questions to ask us about, hey, is this healthy for pro? We're looking at these changes, ahead of this tournament or this meta. How widely would you expect that to impact these things? And I think, one thing I've always really respected about your position as a caster is your understanding of game design, right? And therefore how you can analyze something from the perspective of game mechanics, not just the sports world,
Right?
Because those are two different looks.
Yeah, it was really interesting too, going over to design. Like, one of the coolest things we did, and something that I was able to help out with before I had necessarily like gotten too close to the level that a lot of the game designers who've been doing it for half a decade was actually, hey, what makes something good in pro? What are properties of pro champions? How should we design a framework to try and balance towards pro? Because that's honestly one of the biggest. It's something the design team has made a lot of strides at towards this year. Is like, how do we find a happy middle ground and a rule set towards balancing pro picks versus picks that most of the live games are played on?
Right.
Because you can look at it at one extreme where, hey, 99.9% of our players play this game, and then you have the 0.1% that play in Master and Challenger, and then this even smaller percentage of, less than 1,000 players across the world, and that's because, there's 13 leagues and,
right,
maybe 1,000 pro players. That's an even smaller percentage. Why even bother with that? Well, it's because 100 million people watched World Finals.
Exactly.
Right? So that's actually a really large chunk. And then, by the way, 100,000 people are usually watching League of Legends on Twitch from master accounts. So those are important things. And then those are, in a lot of ways, like really different games. So we came up with the framework, which I want to plug this all the time. It's really exciting. The balance framework is online with specificity in how things should be balanced in League. And there are changes that can be done that aren't necessitated by the balance framework. But for the most part, you can't be too strong in any of the 4 categories we've defined, which is average play, skilled play, which is generally like Plat Plus, and you're skilled.
Skilled player.
Skilled. Yeah, it's like average, majority, but there's like the 90%. Then there's the top 10%, which is Plat Plus, and then there's Elite, which is basically Master up.
Cool.
And then there's Pro, and that's one thing that I still think is never going to be fully understood, because the people that are going to do the digging to actually realize how the game is balanced and what we've kind of currently decided is the best way to balance it, they're not going to be the ones complaining that are playing in Master and saying, why are they nerfing Rammus? It's like, because he had a 55% win rate for 90% of our players, right? And he's banned in 25% or like 30% of their games and winning. So let's actually just balance it. So, right? Stuff like that.
How shocking was it, or how much of like kind of a perspective shift did you go through from again the very heavy pro scene perspective of being a caster to now I am balancing the game for everyone worldwide? Do you feel like you have this unique and really fresh perspective on what it's like to play our game as either a new player or an iron, bronze, silver, lower elo player? Because you've been a high-level player yourself for so long. Yeah, I find it hard. I was bronze when I first started, and I've been plat for a long time, right? But I still see in myself disconnects between my current game knowledge and my bronze-level game knowledge. Like, I question how I ever didn't understand certain things because they are common sense to me now.
Yeah, that's really tricky, and I think that's something that definitely comes with more experience in game design, and that's something I was probably getting better at. But the difference in, like, I wish I had a good example of this, because I can't think of anything clearly off the top of my head. But oftentimes people will be like, "Hey, why does this champion have a stealth? A stealth is a big part of their kit." Well, actually, at like its most basic level, some of the things that are more important is, what just makes sense without having to read the tooltip, right?
Right.
What when playing the first character is a combo that you can actually pull out, and how do you learn these things in a natural way that doesn't just make you quit playing the character or quit playing the game, right? Those are the things that require like way more game design experience, because the things that I was super strong at would have been specifically tuning. Hey, what will this nerf do to its champion's win rate? But those things are only part of the equation. There is so much more that goes into it, as far as like, okay, we're reducing the win rate to where we need it to be, but can we do it in a way that keeps the character as fun as possible, not frustrating to play against, doesn't change the champion's identity, keeps things intuitive? Like, there's so many different things. And as one individual, I can just imagine who, like, even when I was a player, like, I'm going to look at this one specific thing and measure it about whether or not I agree with that, when really the actual decision was made with 80 different variables in mind, and just trying to do a trade-off of what is the best for the most people or for the most qualities. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Also, like, mega stressful, like more stressful than casting, actually.
Okay.
Well, at least for me. And I think that's one of the things that I kind of realized is a lot of people would see casting as this like mega stressful thing.
Yeah.
Because literally anything you say is immortalized in time thanks to the internet.
Yeah.
But that, like,
and it's immediate.
Yeah, and it's immediate. But for whatever reason, I was just more relaxed talking into a microphone than I was, painstakingly thinking about a decision and going through all of the pros and cons.
Is that because of the effect? Like, at the end of the day, you make the wrong change that affects players worldwide. Whereas, I mean, yeah, sure, you say you give misinformation on broadcast. All right, that might have a bit of an effect, but at the end of the day, the impact to some degree is a little smaller. And again, it's less experiential. If you make a decision that ruins my favorite champion, then like, that's something you got to live with when I'm sitting there flaming you on Twitter.
You played 300 hours of this champion, and now you feel like it's ruined.
And it's personal all of a sudden.
Whereas, like, let's go back to 2015. I say balls is D2 in solo queue. Like, what does that really
All right, no, that's worse.
like, that was actually very stressful at the time.
Yeah, I bet.
For people that go back to it. But I can laugh about those things because I recognize more so the entertainment value. And sure, like, League of Legends as a game is still a form of entertainment, but there's like a difference there in the impact that you're having. And it's enjoyable, fulfilling. But when I've experienced that process and that world, and it's good. I think I've said this to a few other people, Dash, like, if I had never experienced casting, then I just
you'd be
getting better at game design. I would love to keep doing that as a job. Stress be damned. Like, there is so much to think about. And try and get better at. But, like, there's a lot of really good positive things about casting that I didn't necessarily appreciate before I left.
All right, well then, so let's talk about those. The time away. So often the phrase, you don't know until you don't have it, right? Kind of, you don't know how much you love it until you don't have it anymore.
It's
kind of a
cliche,
thing.
but it's true.
So what were the aspects of casting that you missed the most?
I liked being able to immediately give my take and my opinions on topics. I thought it would be a lot easier to listen to MSI or read something and not chime in, but rather chiming in was really fun.
Did you feel like you didn't have permission to chime in even via like social now that you weren't in the space? Like, was that?
So I did have permission, but oftentimes I would do like a trade-off in my head of, hey, I should really be focusing on my new career.
Right.
And I should not be putting all this time into this career that I left behind.
Yeah.
So I should transition into this other phase, right?
I mean, that sounds super reasonable to me, right? If you're gonna make the decision, commit to the change, right? To really explore my life without casting and my life with game design. Is this something that I'm happy and content doing for, X amount of time? Because then you can confidently come away with a decision of yes or no.
Yeah.
And ultimately go back. And so, okay, so you missed being able to give your take. The correct answer there was I missed working with you, Dash, the most, but
I mean, that kind of goes without saying.
I'll take a close second.
That's why I'm talking Dash,
right,
rather
naturally.
than Freak. Or...
But how then do you envision, your role returning? Because you do have this fresh perspective. You have had the opportunity to work in another position and appreciate the aspects of the job that you miss. So does your return to casting, is it just assuming the same position as before because that's what you've determined you love the most? Or is there another version of that we're looking at?
So thinking about like the future in casting, one person that I look up to in sports media that I think has attributes that I'd like to replicate would be someone like Bill Simmons, who used to be a columnist, now he's done so much stuff. He was a host on NBA Countdown. He was a great writer. He does podcasts. He is active on social media. Like, he does a very wide array of things where he can then broadcast his opinions, oftentimes just like way earlier than other people and more honestly. I don't know if that necessarily works with casting, and I'd still have to make things hit my voice, but that's some of my long-term goals. As far as the return here, this is something I kind of want to talk to you about as well.
Okay.
Is something that kind of stresses me out when coming back would be, I don't want this to have a negative effect on my teammates and my coworkers, because that was something I really didn't like reading. Not that it shouldn't happen, or not that I'm calling out the community or anything, but when I left to game design, the one thing I didn't want to happen is I didn't want people saying, "Oh man, look at the LCS now. Can't even, DeVicio's gone, now Jatt's gone. Now why do I even watch?" It's like, no, we have a bunch of other people who we've just talked about who've been extremely good at stuff. Azale was a world champion, is a great caster. Kobe has been casting just as long as me. Right?
Yeah.
Super charismatic. So many casters with all these great attributes. And I don't want them to have to put up with people saying, "Man, Jatt's so much better. Look at all the negative qualities of this person." And I don't want that coming back either. It's kind of, it's something that happens with esports oftentimes. Like, you can't compliment someone without insulting someone else.
Right.
Maybe it's just the nature of Reddit. Like, no one's going to upvote the dude who says, "Man, I'm really happy Jatt's back, but I also enjoy the casting of Kobe and Azale. They're all reasonably talented, and really there's just a marginal difference between the three."
Yeah, it's a product of the internet.
That's not going to start by controversial. It's just going to live, and no one's even going to bother writing that, right? They're only going to write it if they have a strong opinion.
Exactly.
They're only going to press a button if you agree or disagree with the strong opinion.
I mean, that's why, conflict is interesting. At the end of the day, conflict is interesting, and so that's what people are going to gravitate to and what will generate discussion.
How was Countdown moving on? Because we did it for a year together.
It's tough, to be honest.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this, like, it was rather sudden, your departure. And so I remember being pulled in.
I apologize for that.
No, it's all good, man.
Follow your heart.
Hey, look, it's we do live television for our job. Our job is literally about adjusting on the fly when shit goes wrong, right? And so if anything, it was a great exercise in proving exactly the point you just made, which is that we are capable without you, right? And that no one person makes or breaks the LCS broadcast.
Absolutely.
From here to here. Anyone could be gone, and this show will still function, and it'll function at the highest level.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that does not mean that the year that we spent building what I think was the best version of the analyst desk up to that point, right? And the synergy that you, Mark, and I started to build, the comfort and reliance and trust and everything, and then beyond that, just this idea that we finally landed on an identity for the desk. We really had an identity and a focus, which I think the analyst desk has lacked for a large portion of its existence. To have built that and then say, okay, we're not going to have that anymore.
Right.
We got to figure out how to create something similar but not the same, right? We're not looking for the imitation of that. That will never succeed, because that's where you'll get the comparisons of this person is not Jatt.
Right.
And so a lot of it was just about, it was a big challenge for us to say, okay, with minimal time, and to take somebody who just has less broadcast experience, no fault of his own, has not spent 6 years casting, and say, you are now going to jump into this spot, do a 30-minute show, like the longest segment of just you know on-air live content, start to finish, knock it out of the park.
To work off of,
right?
No, just reacting,
just create content, have it be light and it was a challenge, but I also think that it, in a lot of ways, your departure. This is a broadcast across the board on the broadcast, forced people to level up. And so this is what I was going to say to you about, while the community may have been sitting there going, uh-oh, I fear for the product. I fear for the product because the person I think who is most capable is leaving.
Right.
What they might not have recognized is how everyone else on the team stepped up to fill that void. I'm looking specifically at Kobe and Azael because they are two of the color casters, and so filling analytical positions. Both of them have been phenomenal coworkers since I've been here at the company, but I think a role that you filled before you left was that bridge between. I mean, I would always call you the lead caster. When people would ask me like, what's kind of Jatt's role or something, I would say, well, he's the lead caster. It wasn't an official title, but it was this idea that like you kind of had that air of, I know what's going on, and if you need some direction or help, I'm approachable. You appreciated the production and building of segments. You know, that idea of playing a bit of producer, and when that left, there was a noticeable gap in that space. Okay. Not necessarily an expertise, right? Like Kobe, Azael, they all know what they're talking about. They all can form very intelligent opinions about the game. But there was a piece that was missing. And for that, I will say that the both of them just didn't skip a beat.
Awesome.
Jumping into that seat and saying, hey, I'm going to start creating content. I'm going to ideate new shows.
So now I can just show up for the show.
Right. Now you just show up and do what you're told and you're good to go.
Easier life.
I get it. All right. This whole time, he's just like, I'm going to leave for 6 months. I'll come back and everyone will have taken all those responsibilities from me. No, but I do. I think as I hope that this period was a huge period of growth for you, either personally and professionally, I think it very much was so for the team. You know, Europe, they went through their losses of bigger personalities earlier than the LCS. Yeah. Right? And like, this is kind of one of the first major. D-Man and Joe.
4 top casters no longer casting.
Right. Now Deficio in and out. Even Shock's moving to contractors, an adjustment for them, right? You're the first really massive one. For NA. And I think that was, again, just it was good proof for us that we could exist without. Yeah. But to you coming back, I say thank God, because I do, well, to the degree that I personally just think the product is better with you on it. I have a massive amount of respect for your ability just as a caster, but also, again, for what you do behind the scenes, for everything that people don't see, because having worked with you for a year on the countdown, I can say that the development and the growth we had over that year was in large part because of your willingness to push that growth, right? To come in and say, I'm not making this transition from caster to analyst just to assume, the status quo. Right. It's to look to make something new and unique. And so that's why now I'll return to this idea of, okay, you're coming back. Okay. You're going back to some casting, as we've already seen with your first week. And so immediately, this is already different than your departure, because you were an analyst and countdown, plus ancillary content position when you left. So in a dream state, what are you doing now on the broadcast team? What's the day in the life of Jatt?
Well, first off, I want to just quickly touch on the stuff you just said. It's great to hear that people have stepped up and filled in spots, because that's good. That's why we have the complete team. I also would say that like all of the producers that have been working on Countdown and working on LCS have also leveled up. And
they're all right.
Yeah, and it's great. Right. Flowers is also someone we didn't mention who's doing great on this or that. Yes. Right. As far as
people slotting into
the whole ecosystem has filled out, and I don't want to come back and just say, by the way, I've returned. Get out of here, other people. That's not what I should do. It's not my place. It's also not what I want to do, right? It's even during 2018, I thought our biggest gains were on Countdown, not necessarily in the post game.
Right. No, agreed.
Right. So
we still have light years to go.
Yeah. I think as far as charting out the long-term plan of what like our casting or our esports would be. It's about finding more places where sports content exists where our league coverage isn't there. So whether or not that's better conversations with pros, whether or not that's better conversations with game design or faster responses to issues, or finding some way to finally break free of this feeling that the community has where because we Riot or the broadcast that we're only willing to say things that are good for Riot, like those things that aren't really true, that I want to find better ways of communicating that stuff. So whether that's like podcasts or shows, I come back at an interesting time where we're going to be ramping up to Worlds. So I think for the most part, the rest of 2019 for me is going to be about, hey, I actually was full-time completely learning a new craft for 8 months. I'm going to relearn some of the rust and get rid of that. To work up towards casting and being better on Analyst Desk and hopefully do some stuff at Worlds.
How was your first cast? How did that feel back?
Okay, so Saturday, I made a big old cheat sheet. Right? Like a classic old cheat sheet. I used to make those back in 2013 where it's got stats about every single game because when I'm more comfortable, I don't necessarily have those cheat sheets because everything gets stored in my like shorter long-term memory. And then I can pay really close attention to the game and the conversation with the other casters. So it was a little rigid in the fact that I did need to refer to my cheat sheet and probably over-relied on stats. Even by the second day, I felt like I was less reliant on stats and more into the conversation. So it's a pretty quick learn. I did several practice casts during the week where I really tried to work on my replay analysis because I realized during the practice cast I was just saying, and as you can see here, the guy runs up to the other guy and he gets him, right? Like, it's basically what I was saying. But instead, when you're doing a replay, you're supposed to already know what happens and then point the viewer's eyes to the right spot.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of just rust stuff that comes off with reps, and then the more that I am in it for the moment rather than catching VODs or highlights of other games, the more I'm going to be comfortable. But I'm pretty happy. The reception was awesome. Really happy for the community for having me back. Really, really appreciative to you and the team for having me back as well, because it's always a difficult conversation to tell this team of people that I worked with for 5 or 6 years, right? Many of our team has stuck around. We actually have, I think, quite low turnover on the broadcast teams when compared to some other industries. So really good relationships with all these people, and just like, it was really sad to leave because it was going to be this big opportunity. And it was actually, even though I'd only been there for 7 months, like really sad to leave Game Design too. I'm like, by the way, I'm flip-flopping, but I'm going to go back to these other guys. So,
well, I guess to that end though, I mean, that kind of brings us all full circle, but that's kind of the beauty of having been able to do this here, right? At Riot is that, you know, it wasn't I'm a freelance caster for X game and then Y company has offered me a game design position. Let me leave here, go here, and then try and get back into this game. It's like, well, everything here was internal. And so those conversations could really be more fluid, I assume, right? You know, between both the departments, and there was maybe a little bit more clarity in the process of like, or at least, you know, having that openness of like, well, I can go from this office to that office and discuss with the stakeholders.
It's always super scary to tell your boss or your manager that you're looking into another
job.
But I think that's how the strength of the relationships we have together and the trust we have in each other really comes in huge, where it's not a burned bridge. There's not bad feelings on other sides. And that's why stuff like this is possible. So really feel incredibly fortunate after making the decision, and really happy, even though there are a lot of emotions that go into it, right? Like, it's this spectrum of things. Really happy that I tried it, and really happy to be back casting, because now I have more clarity and more appreciation for the stuff that's good and what I want to do next, because I've actually answered that specific what if So it's good.
So now it's my turn.
Yeah. When are you going to go? Do a
I'm
commercial?
quitting next week.
What?
Yeah, and you can see me here in 6 months.
Who's going to host? What are we going to do?
No, but seriously, dude, the feelings are mutual. As ecstatic as I was for you when you decided to leave, because I was just so happy to hear that somebody was taking that leap of faith to go explore another option for them.
Yeah.
It's the reason I ended up here. Was exploring an option outside of what I originally thought I was meant to do.
And if we're in a position, like we're both really lucky in the case that we're able to take those leaps, right? That we have the security in our lives to do that stuff.
God, it's a blessing.
It's
but yeah, dude, we're so happy to have you back. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain.
Thanks, man. This is fun.
Yeah. Oh, and work on that telestrator. Because that was
cool.
That was my favorite moment of this weekend's cast from you was, let me highlight this person's inventory. Mini map blows up.
The mini map really big.
Wrong button. And then it just stayed blown up.
We have a telestrator now at the caster desk. We never had that before.
I know.
I'm already using it. The first time I tried touching it, nothing happened. It's controlled by a mouse.
I love it. It was the perfect way to welcome you back.
I'm gonna use that thing a lot.
All right, dude. Thank you very much.